Okay, so the first question, um, pretty much like the services that banks provide to customers. There's deposits, both checkings and savings. Basically, what this means is that banks like provide like a place to store money through checking and saving accounts so that customers can like securely make transactions. And another thing they do is loans. Banks lend money to households and firms, such as mortgages for like car loans, business loans, which allows people to spend and like invest beyond their current income or like the money they have. And it's like a checking card. That's a dollar sign. And another thing they do is payments, like wire transfers and stuff. That's a hand giving money to another hand. Through like debit cards, checks, wire transfers, they make it easier to exchange like money in the economy. And the last thing, I suppose, is interest. Banks pay like interest to savers and charge interest to borrowers. So this is pretty much how the banks actually earn profit. And also banks provide liquidity, meaning customers can like quickly access their money and safely through insurance and regulation. That's a shield. Okay. And the second question, pretty much how banks create money and multiplier. So we have an initial deposit of $1,000 going into bank A. So when a deposit is made, banks must keep a fraction as reserve and can lend the rest. So the required reserve, the reserve will be around $100. Well, will be $100, and the loans is going to be the rest, $900. So with a 10% reserve requirement, or here, this means the bank keeps $100 in the reserves and lends out like the other $900. And when a loan becomes like a deposit from, let's say, bank A that it was originally invested at to like a person to bank B, the new deposit becomes $900 because the $900 loan is spent and redeposited into another bank, which creates a new deposit. And this process is repeated. For example, bank B, they keep $90 and loan out $810, and this process repeats. Each bank continues to keep 10% and lends out the rest, and this essentially creates more deposits. And we see that the money multiplier shows like the total maximum increase in the money supply, which is money multiplier. The formula is 1 over reserve ratio. So every dollar of the reserve can create up to $10 in deposits in this scenario, because it's 1 over 0.1, which is 10. And the third question, let's see a 4,000 withdrawal from Otis Bank. So let's say this is a person. This person withdraws $4,000 in cash. There is no initial change in M1 because M1 includes like both checkable deposits and physical currency. Like when the $4,000 is withdrawn, deposits decreased by $4,000, but currency like held by the public is increased by $4,000, so these cancel out. So initially, the M1 is 0. But part B, where we have to do the maximum change in money supply, again, the reserve ratio is 10% here, which basically means that the multiplier will be 10 because withdrawal reduces reserves. That's like a contradiction. So the initial withdrawal is $4,000, and the multiplier is 10. So the maximum decrease you get is just 4,000 times 10, which is $40,000. The withdrawal reduces bank reserves, which actually limits lending, and through the money multiplier, this leads to like the maximum contraction of $40,000 in the money supply. And the part C part, if banks cannot meet the required reserves, what they can do is they can, let's say this is Bank A, and this is Bank B. What they can do is they can borrow reserves from other banks in the federal fund markets to increase to meet its reserve requirement. And what they can also do is borrow directly. This is like the first scenario, and second thing they could do. Bank 1. They can do is borrow directly from the central bank, and we got this big building, through the discount window, although this is going to be typically more expensive than the first option. And pretty much why, okay, part D, why the reserve ratio requirements exist. So the reason that they exist is it is pretty much a safety shield. The central bank requires reserves to ensure that banks can like meet withdrawal demands and avoid bank runs. So like if people go to all demand their money, the reserve that they have will be enough to actually get all these people the money that they want. So this promotes like stability in the financial system, and it prevents banks from overlending. And also reserves gives like the central bank control over the money supply, since changing reserve requirements affects how much banks can like actually lend.